I think I can make it 2 hours without being late for work. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. You know what? I don't need that job, right? All right, let's press play or we're never going to get out of here.
And also I did a testing to prove that it was, or to indicate that it was blood.
Did the testing that you did, does that establish quantity at all?
Well, I think it does somewhat. I mean, I could visually see the blood on the swatch, and I could visually see the color of the extract that I performed.
Agent Martz, is it your testimony that you can tell with any precision how much blood is in a solution by looking at it?
For this particular case, I think that it is because EDTA in preserved blood is at least 1,000 parts per million. If it is present in humans at a part per million, which we've not established, that is a 1,000-fold difference. And I don't believe that any technique that I could have used could have been off by 1,000%. I mean, I didn't need to be that accurate in order to determine whether or not the blood stains were from preserved blood or from non-preserved blood. I was very, very careful in the sizes that I cut. And I always made sure that I took more samples from the question samples than the control samples that I prepared. I very carefully looked at the color as I extracted, and I was convinced that I had at least as much blood on the control areas as I did on the question areas, or as on the, I had at least as much on the question areas as I did on the control areas. I was very, very careful in this analysis.
Did I understand you to say that you weren't concerned with the quantity of blood that you got on the swatch?
I was concerned with the quantity. I wanted to make sure that I had at least as much blood on the questioned areas as I did on the control areas, and I was convinced that I did. I was concerned, but even if there was a mistake of 1, 2, 50, 100%, I mean, I would still be able to answer the question whether it was from preserved blood or non-preserved blood. I was concerned. Yes, I was concerned.
Did you perform any tests other than just looking at it that was designed to find out how much blood was in the swatch that you started with?
I did a presumptive test on the blood, and I got similar colors, which would indicate I had similar concentrations of blood.
What presumptive test did you use?
I used the phenolphthalein.
Is that considered a quantitative test for blood?
Well, not necessarily, but I mean, you do have a color reaction, just like you have a color of blood. And everything I did to make sure that I had at least as much blood on the questioned areas as I did on the control areas.
Now, the stain from the sock, did you do any kind of testing on that other than looking at it to determine how much blood you got from the sock?
As I mentioned earlier, yes, I did other tests.
Anything other than you've already told us?
No.
Did you examine the swatch material that you got on the back gate under the microscope?
No, I did not.
The samples that you prepared, your known samples from the reference tubes that we looked at, where did you get the swatches to do this?
Well, on the sock, I actually cut a piece off of the sock because I wanted to use the same type of material. So what I had was a blood stain on the sock. So I took the person's blood. It was.
Agent Martz, the question was from the reference tubes. Where did you get the swatches to do this, not the sock?
Well, that's the answer, Your Honor. I took the sock. That's what I used.
Okay, for the sock reference. How about for the gate reference? What'd you use?
Well, as I was explaining, I wanted to try to make things equal. So for the stain that I produced for the sock, I took a piece of the sock. I took some of the blood of Nicole Brown, which was the one suspected or the one identified as being on the sock. I placed blood onto that sock. I let it dry naturally.
All right, Agent Martz, the question was, what did you do to prepare the sample for the gate? Not the sock, the gate.
For the gate, I took a similar type of cotton swatch in the laboratory and placed blood onto that swatch.
You didn't use a swatch that came from LAPD?
No, it was too small. In order to put a blood stain onto a fabric and let it dry naturally, I was using 10 microliters of blood. I needed a certain size swatch. The size that they submitted to me was not large enough to do that particular test.
Is it your opinion that the amount of blood in a swatch is not determined by the kind of swatch? Let me rephrase that. Is it your opinion that if you used a swatch, let's say that had 4 layers of gauze rather than 2, that it's still going to hold the same amount of blood?
I tried to use the same type of swatch that was used in the particular case is all I can say. Whether it's 2 or 4 layers, it would make a difference as to how much it would absorb.
Agent Martz, did you ever examine the swatch you got from LAPD to determine, under the microscope, what kind of a swatch it was? How many layers were there?
No, I did not.
Did you ever look at your own swatch that you got from your lab to determine how many layers were in that swatch?
No, I did not.
Now, you recall, well, let me ask you this. Your eyeball estimate or the way that you did this, what was your estimate of how much blood was on the gate swatch?
I did not estimate the amount of blood on that. What I did was to take a swatch of the same amount and prepared it similarly. I did not attempt to determine how much blood was on the swatch, except for the fact that the swatch appeared to be saturated with blood.
So then you made no effort to determine how much blood was there.
Well, visually I looked at it and the swatch was saturated with blood. Like if you were bleeding and would put something to it, it would absorb the blood. The swatch absorbed the blood. It appeared to be saturated with blood.
You remember me asking that question when we visited together in Washington?
Not specifically. I'm sure you did, but I can't remember specifically my answer.
You remember telling me that you estimated the amount of blood from the back gate as 2 microliters.
I can't remember that, but it would be at least, I'd say it was somewhere between 2 and 5 microliters would be my best guesstimate.
Remember me asking the same question about how much blood was on the sock stain that you cut?
I think I may have answered that. Was it 100 microliters, 200 I can't remember what I said.
50 microliters.
50 microliters.
How much blood is there in a drop? How many microliters?
Oh, I don't know. I don't do a lot of volumes with blood. All I know is I used 10 microliters or 5 microliters and created some stains.
Let's assume hypothetically that 50 microliters of blood is 1 to 2 drops. You have that assumption in mind?
Okay.
Your opinion that there was 1 to 2 drops of blood on the cutting from the sock that you took?
Not that I took. I'm talking about the whole area of the sock that was stained, probably 50 microliters. The area that I took was probably a couple microliters.
So when you told me 50 microliters on that cutting, you misunderstood what I was asking?
Yeah, I was talking about the full stain.
Now, when you came up with a process that you used to extract the blood and EDTA, if there is any EDTA, from the swatch, correct, and from the sock cutting.
Yes.
What method was that?
EDTA and blood are both very soluble in water, so I extracted the materials with 25 microliters of water, let them sit for approximately 40-45 minutes, and they were in a tube which is designed to filter out a lot of the components of blood, to clean up the extract a little bit, because blood contains a lot of chemicals. And then I centrifuged it for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and the liquid passed through the filter and was collected on the bottom of the tube, and that's what I used for analysis.
Were you trying to remove all the blood from the evidence?
Well, I mean, I tried to remove as much as possible. The instrument, the way that it's set up, can take care of, a very complex, dirty sample, but if you shoot too much in, you can clog up the system and cause excess damage to the instrument. So I tried to clean it up as much as possible.
Did you intentionally not try to remove all the blood from the swatch?
Oh, I thought,
Did you misunderstand?
I may have misunderstood your question.
Let me ask again.
Okay.
Did you try to remove all the blood from the swatch, the evidence swatch and the sock cutting you made?
I treated everything the same. All I tried to do was remove the EDTA. Wasn't really concerned too much with the blood. I wanted to remove EDTA from the blood stain was my purpose.
Can I take that you're saying, no, you didn't try to remove all the blood?
I mean, all I did was try to remove the EDTA from the stain for analysis.
Okay. So you tried to get all the EDTA out of there.
Exactly, yes.
And did you have any testing done to determine whether that method that you devised was effective in removing all the EDTA from a blood stain like the ones you used?
I determined that it was effective to remove EDTA from my analysis to determine whether or not the blood stain came from a preserved tube or non-preserved tube.
Agent Martz,
Yes.
did you do any testing to determine whether your system that you devised efficiently removed all of the EDTA from the evidence?
I didn't feel that was necessary. All I felt was necessary was to remove the EDTA for analysis. It didn't make any difference if I got 99.9% of the EDTA or 100% of the EDTA. I removed enough EDTA for the analysis.
Did it make any difference whether you got 60% of it?
It probably wouldn't have, no.
So you weren't trying to get all of the EDTA?
Certainly I was trying to get it all out.
Didn't you have some tests, or weren't some validation studies performed at Quantico to answer that very question, at how good your method was at pulling the EDTA out of the evidence if it was there?
If it was, I didn't understand that was part of what they were doing.
Well, let me show you a couple charts. We have these marked as, what are we up to? I'm sorry, 1269? 69? 1269 A and B? Agent March, did you review the validation materials that Quantico prepared for you?
No, I did not. They were not prepared for me.
Who asked Quantico to do a validation study to validate your method? Well, did anybody?
I don't know.
They did this on their own? You're aware they did it, aren't you?
Yes, yes.
When did they do this validation study?
Overruled.
I don't know the specific time. I think it was before I had done any of my tests, or it may have been about the same time. I really don't know, to be perfectly honest with you.
Was that validation study done in connection with this case?
I believe the way they got involved is they were going to determine whether or not EDTA could be detected in trace quantities or in blood stains to differentiate preserved from non-preserved blood. They were asked to do this, and they were going to devise a procedure which then could be given to a laboratory to do the analysis. When this was all happening, it was determined that we would also try at headquarters to do the analysis ourselves. So I took it upon myself to do some preliminary tests and determined that I could do EDTA analysis. Quantico's testing was done to determine whether or not a procedure could be developed to give to another laboratory to do the testing.
Can we put that down as a yes, that their validation study was for purposes of this case?
Well, you'd have to ask them.
You didn't ask them?
Not specifically, no.
You weren't interested in any of the work they did validating this methodology that you're using?
Well,
Sustained.
it depends on.
Wait, sustained.
Oh.
What's the purpose of a validation study?
Well, I think I did my own validation study, and I think the purpose
Move
of
to strike non-responsive.
Sustained. Answer stricken.
What's the purpose of a validation
to
study?
determine whether or not a procedure works.
Is it your understanding that that's what your research people at Quantico did?
They produced something that they called a validation study. I know that, yes.
And is it your testimony that you never looked at it?
I never looked at it, no.
During the lunch break, could you review that for us? Because I want to ask you some questions about it.
I don't see any purpose for it, to be perfectly honest with you.
Well, let me show you 1269A and B. And for the record, 1269A is discovery page 8419. 1269B is 8422. You look at those. Are those chromatograms?
Yes, they are.
They appear to be generated by the FBI.
I would not know that.
Is that format used by the FBI? Is
This is a format used by the Finnegan TSQ instrument.
that the format you use?
Well, it's one that we have available at the FBI laboratory, yes.
Same format as on all your charts?
Yes.
And let's assume hypothetically that tests were done to determine how efficient your method was at removing EDTA. You have that hypothetical in mind?
Okay.
How would you test that hypothesis?
Well, you would extract it and then run it against the known.
Does it appear that that's what those charts do?
Sustained.
Can you check with your people at Quantico over the lunch hour to see whether they did that test and what they found?
Overruled. Overruled.
Will you do that for me?
I don't know that they'll be here. I mean, I can call. What exactly do you want me to find out?
See whether...
Why don't we confer with Agent Marks at the lunch hour?
Okay. When the materials that you had put together were provided to the prosecutors, do you understanding that that validation study was provided as well?
Yes.
Then is it fair to say that you didn't do any studies yourself to determine whether your method for extracting blood, or EDTA, was efficient?
I think I did. I think I did. On the February the 8th, I was given 2 samples by someone in the laboratory, one with EDTA and one without. And I was very easily able to determine which stain contained the EDTA and which one didn't.
All right, move to strike non-responsive.
Overruled.
Did you ever run a test where you did an extraction and then you did a second extraction to see if you had picked up all the EDTA in the first extraction?
No.
Would you agree that if you didn't pick up all the EDTA in the first extraction, you're going to see less of it when you run the test?
Yes.
Have you done any tests at all to determine whether the age of a blood stain affects your ability to extract it with water alone?
Yes.
And do you have an opinion on whether aged blood stains can be extracted with the same efficiency with just water as new bloodstains?
I had conducted several tests on old blood, and two from 1993, and I think the other one was from 1991. These were EDTA bloodstains. And I was convinced, based on the analysis that I did with those stains, that the age of the blood, at least over 3 or 4 years, had no effect in me determining whether or not the stains were from preserved or non-preserved blood.
All right, move to strike that all as non-responsive.
Sustained. Answer stricken in its entirety.
Agent Marks.
Sergeant Marks, would you listen carefully, please, to the question? Answer the question that is directed to you, sir.
Did you do any tests to determine whether an old dried blood stain, not blood from a tube, but a blood stain that is older, can be just as efficiently extracted from that stain as a new blood stain that's been put on the stain and just dried for an hour or so with the use of plain water?
Yes, I did. I took 2 blood stains from 1993 that had been on material since 1993. I extracted those, and I got similar results for EDTA that other blood that was freshly prepared. I got similar results.
Did you make any effort in that particular test, which, by the way, when did you do that?
That was done last weekend.
Now, when you did that, did you make any effort to quantify the amount of blood that you were able to get out of that old blood stain?
No.
Do you have any other base of experience vis-a-vis old blood stains versus new blood stains in terms of how efficient just using water is at removing all the blood?
No.
Do you agree with Dr. Reeders that using an ammonia solution in water is a better way to make sure that you extract all the blood?
Well, I mean, are we talking blood or EDTA?
Both. Let's talk both.
For EDTA, I don't know, to be perfectly honest with you.
And you did no testing to answer that
No,
question either, did
no.
you? Now I want to ask you about the gate. Did you perform any tests, or to your knowledge, did your lab in Quantico perform any tests to determine whether or not a blood stain, an EDTA blood stain, placed on a metal gate and left exposed to the outside for, let's say, hypothetically a day to 3 weeks, whether there would be any degradation or loss of EDTA?
No, I did not.
Did you ever make any effort to determine the type of paint that was on the back gate?
No, I didn't believe that it was necessary.
Paints have metals that tend to attract EDTA, don't they?
In my opinion, the EDTA would stay in the blood stain.
Paints have metals that EDTA likes, don't they? And it's very attractive to them.
I think it would depend on the type of paint, yes.
Did you do any tests at all to determine whether the type of paint upon which a blood stain was deposited would attract some of the EDTA and remove it from the blood?
Well, I used one particular paint that we had in the laboratory, a metal surface. I don't know exactly which type of paint it was, but I was able to place a blood stain on a painted metal surface and effectively remove the EDTA.
What effort did you make to find out whether the paint you used bore any similarity to the back gate?
None.
Did you make any effort to find out whether there was any rust on the back gate where that blood stain was deposited?
No, again, I didn't feel it was necessary.
Does rust attract EDTA?
It could.
It's iron, isn't it?
Well, but iron exists in different states. That's iron oxide, and I don't know the properties of iron oxide for attracting EDTA.
EDTA loves iron, doesn't it?
In certain forms, depending on the pH.
Did you make any effort to determine what other environmental things might have, let me rephrase it. Did you make any effort to determine whether there was any fertilizer that had been used in the area of the gate and may have gotten on the blood stain?
No, I did not.
Do fertilizers contain chemicals that are attracted to EDTA, or that EDTA is attracted to?
I don't really know how that's relevant, but I guess that they could.
Were you trying to, in your positive controls, design them in such a way that they mimicked as close as possible what you would have expected to find had EDTA blood been used and put on the back gate?
Well, I tried to do that to the best of what I had available, and I did that with the sock. I used the same sock. With a gate post, I didn't have that gate post. We're talking many months later when I got the samples. The gate post is certainly in different condition now than it was then. I couldn't stain it on the same area of the gate. Based on the testing that I did, I didn't feel that it was necessary to duplicate exactly the conditions because EDTA is a very, very stable chemical.
Isn't the purpose of a positive control to test the hypothesis, let's assume that EDTA blood was used under the conditions which these stains were deposited, preserved, and collected, and see what we find. Isn't that what a positive control is for?
The positive control is to determine whether or not you can identify the substance that you're looking for in the matrix that it's on.
Is one of the purposes of a positive control to try and simulate the hypothesis. Let's assume that EDTA blood was used on these blood stains, and let's put it through the same type of conditions that the evidence was, and see what we find at the end of the road.
Well, I mean, you can't duplicate everything exactly all the time. What you try to do is to duplicate as much as possible, and that's why I used a painted surface in the laboratory to duplicate a painted gate, to determine whether or not I could remove EDTA from a painted surface.
Your painted surface, what was that? What kind of metal was that?
It was, I'm sure it was an iron. It was a can.
It was a can, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a can.
It wasn't anything like a gate, was it?
Sustain.
Well,
Sustain.
Okay. Now, other than, and by the way, when you painted your can, how long did you leave I'm sorry, when you put the blood stain on the can, how long did you leave it there before you swabbed it off?
probably 45 minutes.
Did you make any effort to deposit a stain on that can and leave it for a period of 1 day to 3 weeks to see what you might find?
No, I did not.
Did you ever make any efforts to determine what the weather was from June 12th to July 3rd, the period of time when that blood stain may have been on that gate?
I bet it
didn't
was
feel that
lovely weather.
necessary for my determination.
Did you make any effort to determine whether that particular blood stain had changed in terms of being weathered from the time it was deposited until it was collected?
No, you've got to remember here, this blood stain has been identified as human blood. DNA is a very fragile chemical. EDTA is a very, very, very stable chemical. So I felt that if it could be determined that it was blood, that I would have no trouble determining the EDTA content.
Is your reason for not doing any of those things that I've been talking about is because you made assumptions that they wouldn't make any difference?
Well, I don't know that I necessarily call them, well, you could call them assumptions. It was based on some scientific information that I had that I based that on.
Is it based on any experimentation on your part at all?
Well, I think it is, in a way, experiments that I've performed over the last 20 years in the laboratory. I think it's based a lot on that.
You ever worked with didn't you say you'd never worked with EDTA until this case?
Well, I've worked with chemicals that are similar, and I know what the melting point and boiling point of EDTA is, its properties, its solubility, and there are certain assumptions, as he mentions, that you can make.
Let's talk about the sock. Did you make any effort? Let's assume that the sock was collected around June 13th. Okay? And did you make any effort to determine how many times the sock had been examined under high-intensity lights or any other kind of lighting during the period of time, June 13th, till you got it?
No, again, I didn't feel it was necessary. EDTA, when dried, is a very, very, very stable chemical. The FDA would not use it as a preservative if it wasn't stable. It's a very stable chemical.
Are you aware of any study anywhere that looks at the effect of light on EDTA in a dried bloodstain?
No.
Did you perform any such test?
Well, in a sense I did. I looked at blood stains that were several years old.
Do you have any idea what the history of those bloodstains were in terms of how often they'd been examined and under what conditions?
No, but I'm sure they were under various conditions.
How do you know that?
Well, it's part of the FBI's procedure to dry the blood stains on the cloth. They were dried back in 1993
Where did those stains
on
come
the
from?
cloth. It was a case that was submitted to the FBI laboratory.
Where did they come from?
From people.
In what form?
Liquid blood.
They were then made into stains?
That's correct.
So those weren't stains deposited on a surface like a gate or a sock at all, were they?
Well, I mean, they were stains that we placed onto fabric.
They weren't evidence stains from a crime scene of blood taken off of evidence, were they?
No.
Did you do any tests to determine whether the effects of sudden temperature change, or what the effects might be on EDTA in the sock of sudden temperature changes?
No, again, I didn't feel it was necessary. EDTA is a very stable chemical that will decompose, I think, at about 290 degrees centigrade. It's a very hot temperature. It's a very stable chemical.
Are you aware of any studies that look at that question?
No.
So again, you're saying that you're making assumptions that it wouldn't make a difference, that's why you didn't check for it.
I'm making assumptions based on my 20 years of experience working with chemicals.
Is one of the reasons you didn't do some of these things is that you were kind of rushed on this?
No, I believe that I was able to answer the question which was put to me, and that was my sole objective, to answer the question, and I believe I was able to do that without doing all the things that have been mentioned.
Would you agree that you have had time since your testing in February to do some of these validation type studies that I've suggested?
Well, I mean, you must realize I'm in charge of a unit at the FBI laboratory. I'm presently now in charge of the section until we get a new section chief. I'm wearing a lot of different hats. I'm working cases, reviewing the work of over 20 people, and right now I'm actually in charge of over 200 people. I'm in charge of the whole scientific analysis section of the FBI laboratory in the interim until we get a new section chief. So I do have a lot of responsibilities at the FBI laboratory, and I believe that I answered the question satisfactorily. I did not need to do any other testing. Since the other day, I've performed a few more tests, but other than that, I didn't feel that any other testing was needed.
All right, so can I take it from that answer that it is a time problem? It will take a lot of time.
Well, it's that plus necessary. Was it necessary for me to do any other testing to answer the question? In my opinion, it was not.
Okay. What is the appropriate method if you're going to use mass spectrometry to quantify the amount in an unknown sample?
Well, there's many different ways.
What's the most accepted?
Well, I don't know whether it's the most accepted, but to me, the best way in mass spectrometry is to use what's called a deuterated standard, and that's what we routinely use at the FBI laboratory for quantitation. It's a very expensive means of quantitation, but I believe it's the most effective in mass spectrometry for precise quantitation.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, an internal standard is something that's very close to the EDTA, but you know it's there and you know how much is there, correct?
Correct.
And it's actually mixed in with the stain, with the liquid that you're going to look at, correct?
That's
In
correct.
other words, it's not run at one time and then your evidence is run at a second time.
Correct.
And the reason why you run them together is because you can get this wide variation from one run to the next in terms of what comes out of the machine, right?
Well, it depends on your definition of wide variation. There is some variation, but it's an acceptable variation.
Well, you would agree that getting a fourfold difference on two things that are identical is not terribly precise, is it?
Not for precise quantitation.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, we talked about whether you used an internal standard or not in Washington, did we not?
Yes, we
Do
did.
you remember what you told me about that?
Well, I told you I would have liked to use an internal standard, and the deuterated standard was not available.
Actually, you recall telling me that you would have loved to have had one.
I would have loved to have had one, and then I wouldn't have had to answer so many questions. But
And you remember telling me that it was the ultimate way to quantify.
that's the way that we prefer it at the FBI laboratory.
You didn't use an internal standard, did you?
It was not available.
You didn't use an internal standard, did you?
I did not use one because one was not available for the type of testing that I did.
What efforts did you do to try and find one?
I contacted the manufacturer, one of the largest, Radion, of deuterated standards. They told me that it would be at least 3 months to develop it. It was a very expensive price also. The price didn't matter so much, but it was a time limit. It would be at least 3 months to develop that standard for me, or to make that standard.
Who is Cambridge?
That could be a company out of Canada that also makes deuterated standards.
Did you ever check with them?
No, I did not.
So you checked with one company.
I checked with the one that we generally do business with, which is one of the larger producers of the deuterated standards.
How many other companies are there that produce these kinds of standards?
I don't know, to be perfectly honest.
Did you make any effort to find out any other companies that might have one?
I believe when I inquired with the one company, I asked them if they knew of any other company that produced it, and I believe their response was they didn't know of any other company.
Mr. Blazer, about 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
5 more minutes.
Okay. What's your understanding of a deuterated standard in terms of its cost?
Well, to have one developed is totally different than to buy one.
I'm happy to say I have zero understanding of a deuterated standard. But my standards are really, really, really low. So if a deuterated standard is high standard, I wouldn't know anything about that.
Generally, you can buy them for several $100s, but to have one developed may be many, many, many thousands of dollars.
So do you agree if one were commercially available, it certainly would be within the budget of the FBI?
Oh, sure, yes. Oh, sure.
Now, I want to ask you about your underlying data for the test that you did. Let's talk about the ones in February. I take it that these charts don't pop out of the machine, do they?
No, you have to request them, or you actually tell the instrument to print out a particular chart.
Now, the data that's coming out of the machine, the raw data, what happens to that?
It's stored on a computer.
And it's stored on a computer for possible later analysis?
Well, generally what we do at the FBI laboratory is after the case is completed, we'll erase the file because we only have so much storage space. So after we've dictated the case and all the review's been done, we'll erase the files.
After you've completed the case. Now, Where's the raw data that you did that formed the basis for all these charts right now?
It no longer exists. It was erased off the computer.
No, I don't think that's true, Richard.
It's been destroyed.
No.
Well, yes.
Now, does the FBI in their computer system have what's called a backup system?
Not for the instrument in the laboratory.
Now, did you assume that when you had dictated your report that you were done with this case?
I was done with those analysis. I had made my opinion, a very careful opinion, and I was convinced of this. And as far as I was concerned, I did not need to look at that data again. I had made my conclusion. I had printed out the appropriate charts, and I would not need to see that data again.
Weren't you expecting that you would be called as a prosecution witness up until the day they rested?
Sustained.
Wasn't your state of mind such that you knew or you anticipated that you would be called to testify by the prosecution in this case?
Sustained.
Did you know when the data was destroyed that this trial was still going on?
Or roll.
Yes.
Question.
Would you agree that without your underlying data, there's no way that some other person
Yes,
can
I
review
know. He
that
just
data?
comes in and asks that same question
Well,
every day.
obviously, in this case, someone has reviewed it, so I don't know how I can agree with that.
But I love
Talking
you,
about the
Richard.
underlying data that forms the basis for the generation of these charts, the digital data.
Can you ask that question again?
Yeah. Would you agree that the fact that you've destroyed the digital data, which is the underlying raw data for these tests, makes it impossible for anyone to review that digital data, anyone other than you? And even you can't review
Well, I
it.
can't even review it. I mean, that data is gone. Nobody can review that data anymore. But the charts that represent the digital data have been printed out, and those can be reviewed.
Would you agree that there are different ways to analyze your digital data with this kind of a test other than the charts you produced?
I don't know that I understand that question.
Do you know, I'm sorry, do you know whether there are other ways to analyze digital data that comes out of the machine other than by producing just this kind of chart?
I'm sure that there are, but, you know, at the FBI laboratory, what we do is try to make identifications. And for that, we have certain charts that we print out that represent whether something is there or not. And that's what we do all the time. Whether someone can do something else with that digital data, I don't know. It's not something that we do at the FBI laboratory.
Are you not familiar with the other methods that you can use with your Finnegan system to generate, using the raw data to do different kinds of analysis?
Maybe if you could give me some specific...
All right, Mr. Blazer, we're going to take a break at this point. We're going to take a break. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break for the noon hour. Please remember all my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourself or any opinions about the case. Conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you or allow anybody to communicate with you with regard to the case. And Agent March, you're ordered to come back at 1:30. All right, we'll be in recess until 1:30. All right, let me see counsel without the court reporter, please. Mr. Simpson is again present with his counsel. People are represented, jury is not present, and Agent Marks is present. Counsel, anything we need to take up before we invite the jurors to rejoin us? All right, Deputy McNair, let's have the jurors, please. And counsel, if you recollect, we will conclude today at 4 o'clock, at least as far as the jury is concerned. And we have a number of legal arguments we can take up at 4 o'clock. All right, good afternoon, Agent Marks.
Good afternoon.
Agent March, you are reminded, sir, that you are still under oath, and Mr. Blazer, you may continue with your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Agent Marks.
Good afternoon.
During the lunch break, did you have an opportunity to call your folks at Quantico regarding the question of whether your method of extraction allowed you to remove all the EDTA?
Yes, I did.
And did you make a determination as to whether, first of all, did they test your method?
Yes, I did.
And did they determine that your method was capable or allowed you to remove 100% of the EDTA from the sample you were extracting?
They removed approximately 93% was the average.
So they determined that your method did not remove all the EDTA, correct?
That's correct.
I want to ask you a couple more questions about destroying your data. Did you indicate that your criterion for when it's okay to destroy the data was when you thought a case was over?
No, once it's dictated.
Once it's dictated?
Once the case has been dictated and the report has left the laboratory.
Okay. How long after the reports left the laboratory in your mind, is
Hey,
it okay to destroy the data?
Richard, you changed it up. You put on the LA freeway. That's new. I haven't heard you say that one yet. I heard you say, if he's innocent, why did he escape in his Ford Bronco? You say that every day. But today you added on the LA freeway. You're getting wild and crazy up in this chat today. Whew.
Immediately.
Now, would you agree that using that standard, that never allows other scientists to review your data?
Well, I mean, we provide the data, like in this case, the printouts, but the electronic data is lost, yes.
And as part of your function as a criminalist, as an expert, you testify in cases, and there oftentimes are experts on other sides of the case, correct?
That's correct.
And is your understanding that it's common practice for one expert from one side of the case to look at the other expert's data to see if they made the right decision, right interpretations?
In the 20 years that I've been in the FBI laboratory, no one has ever asked to look at the digital data until now.
Did you find out from Quantico whether they saved their digital data?
Yes, they did.
Is it your understanding that, well, would you agree with this? It would be relatively easy for you to have saved your data if you wanted to.
Well, not relatively easy. There's only a limited amount of space on the hard drive, and once that is full, then you have to find another means of saving that data. And I wouldn't agree that it's that easy. It's certainly not complicated, but it's something that we don't practice at the laboratory.
Well, there are tape backup systems for the kind of computer you have that are very easy to attach and use, aren't there?
Well, I don't know about easy to attach and use, but they are available, yes. The deck equipment is quite complex in attachments. It's not like a simple, PC home computer.
Now, do you accept that with that underlying digital data, you could do some additional things such as averaging spectra?
Yes.
And you could also do some further analysis by involving subtracting out background noise.
Yes.
And these are things that you can no longer do because your data is gone, correct?
Well, you can't do it on those data. You could always rerun the same samples or similar samples. There is blood stain left in this particular case. If someone wanted to analyze that stain, they could certainly analyze it.
But as far as the test that you're testifying about, that can't be done, can it?
No.
Now, you described to us how you made your positive control samples, and that's K67 and K68.
Those were the blood samples that I used to make my positive controls, yes.
And that was taken directly from the reference tubes of Mr. Simpson and Miss Simpson.
That's my understanding, yes.
Could you show me in your notes where you describe that process?
Right there.
Do your notes tell you how large a swatch you made?
No, they don't.
Now, I want to ask you some questions about the test that you performed on your own blood. You have that in mind?
Yes.
Now, when did you do that test?
I believe the first one was April the 11th.
Do you have any records that you can check that?
Yes.
Your personal opinion just told us
I'm
more
sorry, May
about the
11th,
crime
1995.
Did
Then
you make any notes
a
describing
100
how you
years
did that
of this
experiment?
trial
No, I
has
did
told
not.
us about the
You
crime.
didn't write anything down, did you?
No.
Is it standard practice in your laboratory when you're performing tests like that you don't write anything down?
Well, if you perform the test the same way you perform the other tests that are written, sometimes the person may or may not elect to write down the exact same thing that he wrote down before. In this particular case, I examined it the same way I had examined all the other samples, and I did not write down how I did it.
So you performed these tests the same way that you did the other tests you've been testifying about?
Pretty much so. I made a cutting, I extracted it with water, filtered, centrifuged, and injected.
Well, you didn't use a blood stain from evidence, did you?
No.
Describe to me how you got non-EDTA blood to use.
I went to the health service and I asked them to take 2 blood samples. I told them to take a non-EDTA sample first and then collect an EDTA sample. So they took a red stopper tube, collected blood, and then took a purple stopper tube and collected blood.
Now, the red top tube, does that have any chemicals in it to preserve the blood?
I believe the one that they used was a serum collection tube, and I don't know if it did or not. I know it didn't have EDTA in it.
Do you know whether a red top tube has any kind of preservative in it at all?
No.
Now, from the point in time when you had your blood drawn into a red top tube, how long was it until you made a swatch?
I believe it was several days.
Do you have any information indicating that the blood stains in this case were ever put in a red top tube and allowed to sit for several days?
No, I do not.
So would you agree that that particular set of conditions that you did isn't anything like the testing that you did of the evidence in this case?
No, I would disagree with that. EDTA is very soluble in blood, and in my opinion, it will be throughout the blood sample. And in preparing those samples, I don't believe that that would make a difference.
When you put this blood in a red top tube and let it sit for several days, where did it sit?
In the refrigerator at work.
And was it still blood when you got it out several days later?
Yes?
How long does it take blood to coagulate, unpreserved?
Oh, I think about 5 minutes.
Did this blood coagulate at all?
Yes.
So it had been coagulating for 5 days
It was a couple of days, yes.
and sitting in the red top tube for 5 days.
That's correct.
Do you have any indication that the blood that was used on these stains was clotted blood?
No.
One of the things that EDTA is used in is rubber, correct?
I don't know that specifically, but I would assume that it could be.
What's the stopper made out of on the red top tube that you had the blood in for several days?
I don't know, to be perfectly honest with you.
Look like rubber?
It's either a rubber or synthetic rubber.
Is the inside of a red top tube coated with anything?
The red test tubes that were used had a chemical in them. I don't know what it was.
Silicone?
I don't know.
Do you know whether there's EDTA and silicone on the insides of blood tubes?
No, I do not.
Did you ever do any studies by putting plain water in a red top tube, letting it sit for several days, and testing to see whether it had any EDTA in it?
No, I did not.
So is it fair to say that you do not know the answer to the question of whether or not the EDTA, or what looked like EDTA that you found in your blood, came from the tube itself?
I don't know that EDTA has ever been used in anything other than the purple top tube. Other than that, I don't have any information.
Now, I'm not talking about EDTA as a preservative in a liquid form in the tube. I'm talking about the tube itself containing materials that have EDTA. Did you do any research at all to determine whether or not what you found in your blood came from the tube rather than you?
No.
Now, when you went back this weekend, you ran that sample again, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And it had been sitting in, at that point, sitting in the red top tube for how long?
Well, since May, and then I analyzed it in July.
Okay.
May.
Was your purpose in running it again to determine whether you really had EDTA in your blood or not?
No, it was just to show the stability of EDTA over time.
So you weren't trying to determine whether you had EDTA in your blood when you did the second run?
The purpose of all of my experiments from the beginning, as I mentioned, were to determine whether or not the blood stains were from preserved or non-preserved blood, and to differentiate between preserved and non-preserved blood. I had.
Agent Mark,
Yes, sir.
the question was, the second run in July, what was the purpose of doing that? The second run.
To distinguish between preserved blood and non-preserved blood, to show that I could do that on blood that had aged for several months.
What would be the best way, if you really wanted to test whether you had EDTA in your blood, what would be the best way to do that, in your opinion?
I don't know about the best way. I'm sure that I do have EDTA in my blood. The question is how much I have in my blood, and to determine how much I have would depend on which instrumentation I would use. And I would probably want to take a larger volume of blood and somehow or another concentrate the EDTA for analysis.
Well, you would agree, would you not, that the amount of EDTA you would expect in your blood from your diet is in the parts per billion range?
I don't know that I could agree with that. I don't know that there's any data that substantiates that.
All of the studies that we've looked at that you've provided to us indicate that, don't they?
There was one study in 1954, and it had conflicting information.
By the way, the textbook that I mentioned to you, do you remember the author's names?
Goodman and Goodman and I think I remember.
That's a 1994 textbook, isn't it?
But I believe in that particular case, they're referring back to the original study.
Well, it's a 1994 textbook, isn't it?
It's a stain.
Is it a well-accepted, current work of expertise in the area of pharmacology?
Well, I think what it has is references of the last work that was done in a particular area.
Is this a treatise that is used in pharmacology as a standard reference work?
It's a reference book, yes.
Do you know of any other reference work that contradicts that?
Yeah, as I mentioned, in 1954, there was conflicting data in that paper.
That's the one paragraph we read?
Right.
Anything else?
Anthony?
I think there's been some other studies on iron EDTA and its absorption that may or may not conflict it.
Did you research that?
I can't remember the exact articles, but there possibly was some other conflicting data on iron EDTA.
When you researched this, did you attempt to find that kind of literature?
What I was trying to find in literature was how much EDTA would be present in a person, and I could not satisfactorily answer that question.
But one of the things you'd look for is how much is absorbed, for instance, with iron, right?
Well, one of the things that would be critical to determine that would be how much EDTA would be absorbed.
Those studies, the ones that you are referring to, can you give me the name of one of them?
Not right offhand.
When you pulled together the literature to prepare for your testimony, is it fair to say that you tried to get the articles that were the most relevant to what you were going to testify about?
I tried to get most relevant articles on EDTA.
Okay. Now, by the way, where is the underlying data when you ran your own blood? The digital data.
It's been erased.
Did you ever write a report on testing your own blood?
No, it was not casework.
Then why did you destroy it before you dictated a report?
There was nothing to dictate. It was research that I had performed on my own blood.
Was it done for this case?
Yes.
Did you tell the prosecution you were going to do it?
I don't believe I did.
Did you tell them after you did it what the results were?
I believe it was furnished to them at the same time it was furnished to you when you visited me on about a week ago Tuesday.
So you never wrote, I'm sorry, were you done?
Yeah, I never wrote a report.
There is no resolution on this matter. I had an opportunity to speak with the defendant in this case. He wishes to have a jury trial or a bench trial.
Were you ever asked to conduct any kind of exam to determine
I'm not
taking other people's review,
muted.
checking their blood directly rather
So-
than putting it in any kind of a container?
I'm way behind schedule today.
I'm going to set this over.
So I have to get a video out. So I am watching
whether
OJ
they're
with
EDTA.
you, but I am making a video for court disorder. It's called multitasking. I'm so sorry. I thought I was muted.
Did the prosecution ever asked you to test
gonna
any
be a
of
good
these
video.
samples, the other forensic samples in this case, blood stains that may have come from Nicole Brown Simpson, for instance, to see whether they showed EDTA?
No.
Did they ever ask you to check any stains in the area of stains collected in Chicago to determine whether there's any
I start
EDTA
work at
in Simpson's blood
11:30.
for
I
that same
can't
stain?
Not to my knowledge.
do it after the stream. I can't on time.
Not to my knowledge.
I got to shower
Did they
at
ever
some
ask you to
point.
test any of the other evidence in this case to see if there was EDTA present?
Not to my knowledge.
That's all I have.
Ms. Clerk.
Agent Martz, first of all, based on all of the testing that you conducted in this case, did you come to a conclusion as to whether or not the evidence bloodstains taken from the rear gate and taken from the socks found in the defendant's bedroom had blood that came from the tube with a preservative known as EDTA?
Yes, I did.
And what conclusion was that?
I concluded based on the work that I done on the 19th, the 22nd, and the 28th that the blood stains in question did not come from preserved blood. They did not come from blood that was preserved with EDTA.
Now, you were subpoenaed to testify here by the defense, is that correct?
That is correct.
You've been asked a series of questions by Mr. Blazer concerning experiments and whether or not you conducted them.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
You were asked whether you conducted experiments to determine whether EDTA will break down if it is in blood that is on a metal surface such as a rear gate.
Yes.
You know who Dr. Reeders is, correct?
Yes, I do.
You are familiar with the equipment he has in his lab?
Yes, I am.
You know who Dr. Ballard is?
Yes, I do.
Is he present here in court today?
Yes, he is.
Is he seated right back there at counsel table?
Yes, he is.
You see the gentleman in the long blonde hair and the glasses?
Yes, he is.
Are you familiar with the equipment that he has, sir?
Some of the equipment that he has, yes.
Does he have a liquid chromatograph tandem mass spectrometer?
To my knowledge, he does not have a liquid chromatograph mass spectrometer.
What is it that he has, to your knowledge?
I believe that he has mass spec capabilities.
Then the equipment that is possessed by Dr. Reeders and by Dr. Ballard, is that equipment sufficient to conduct the experiment of determining whether or not EDTA will break down or degrade when in blood on metal such as a gate?
Yes, it is.
And did Dr. Reeders ever confer with you about any experiments that he had conducted in that regard?
No, he did not.
Or did Dr. Ballard?
No.
You were asked whether or not you'd conducted any experiments to determine whether the type of paint found on the rear gate at 875 South Bundy would degrade EDTA in blood if placed on that paint. You remember that?
Yes, I remember.
To your knowledge, could Dr. Reeders perform such an experiment?
Yes, he could.
Could Dr. Ballard perform such an experiment?
Yes, he could.
To your knowledge, have they?
To my knowledge, they have not.
You were asked also, sir, about whether or not rust, such as what may be present on the rear gate at 875 South Bundy, may interact with EDTA to degrade it if in blood on that surface. You recall that question?
Yes, I do.
Could Dr. Reeders perform a test to determine whether or not that substance would degrade EDTA in blood?
I'm going to object to this line of questioning and ask to approach if necessary.
With Corporal, please. Rust.
Rust.
Never sleeps.
You were asked a question as to whether or not you conducted any experiments to determine whether or not EDTA in a blood stain on a rusty surface will degrade as a result of contact with that rust. Do you recall that question?
Yes, I do.
Could Dr. Reeders perform such an experiment, sir, to
Yes, he-
determine whether or not EDTA would degrade under those conditions?
Yes, he could.
And to your knowledge, has he?
To my knowledge, he has not.
You recall you were asked a question as to whether or not you conducted any testing as to whether or not fertilizer, if EDTA in a blood stain was subjected to fertilizer, whether that would break down the EDTA. You recall that question?
Yes, I do.
Could Dr. Reeders perform such a test or experiment, sir?
Yes, he could.
And to your knowledge, has he?
To my knowledge, he has not.
Do you recall questions concerning whether or not high-intensity light focused on the socks might degrade any EDTA that was present in the bloodstains on that sock? Remember?
Yes, I do.
To your knowledge, could Dr. Reeders perform such an examination or such an experiment to determine whether or not EDTA would degrade under that condition?
Yes, he could.
To your knowledge, has he?
To my knowledge, he has not.
You were asked a series of questions concerning whether or not sudden temperature changes could cause EDTA to degrade in blood. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Could Dr. Reeders perform experiments to determine whether or not sudden temperature changes would affect or degrade EDTA?
Yes, he could.
To your knowledge, has he done so?
To my knowledge, he has not.
Now, you indicated that you did confer with Dr. Reeders concerning the subject matter of this case on a couple of occasions, correct?
It was on one occasion last week.
Proceed.
It was on one occasion, I believe it was last week.
Now, the graphs that you generated as a result of the testing that you conducted were furnished to the prosecution and to the defense back in late February, early March,
The one graph was, there was additional graphs that I did this weekend.
other than the ones that you did this last weekend. Was the other data submitted to the defense and the prosecution months ago?
Yes, it was.
At any point did Dr. Reeders call to tell you that he could not form conclusions or opinions because such experiments as I previously outlined to you had not been done?
No, he did not.
Now, you recall that Dr. Reeders testified that he felt that based on the EPA study concerning the maximum tolerance for EDTA in the blood based on an experiment with fish, extrapolated from that the normal amount or the maximum amount you would find in people would be in parts per billion. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes, I do.
In your expert opinion, sir, was it appropriate for him to use that EPA study to form a conclusion as to what would be the normal amount of EDTA you would expect to find in an average person?
I don't believe so. When I first got that study, which was, I believe, 2 nights ago, maybe it was Sunday night, I received that study, and the first thing in looking at it, it appeared to be out of place. They were talking about toxic cleanup of EDTA, and they had a lot of things that were mentioned, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere came the fact that it said 1 part per billion would be normally expected in a human or considered to be the normal level. And it just didn't make sense to me why that would be there. So what I did was the next morning I called back to the laboratory and had them search the same reference. And it ended up that it was not a part per million, but it was 1,000, or a part per billion, it was 1,000 parts per million. Evidently, when it was printed out without good resolution, I really don't have the explanation now. In talking to EPA, they claim that it's 1,000 parts per million is what it's supposed to be. So I did some further research, and it ended up that that was solely based on some studies to determine how much EDTA was needed to preserve blood. It had absolutely nothing at all what to do with the amount that would be expected in a person or could be toxic to a person. It was completely out of context, and it was wrong.
Now, are you aware, sir, of any study that has been conducted to determine what amount of EDTA you could expect to find in any one of us on a given day?
No, I'm not aware of any study.
Now, you were asked a series of questions about the quantification of blood in the samples that you took for testing. You recall those questions?
Yes, I do.
Now, if you wanted the exact quantification of the amount of blood that you are testing, you could do the test that counsel proposed. Is that correct?
Well, what that does is determines how much hemoglobin is in the blood, and from that you can estimate how much blood is present.
All right. Now, the evidence that you're speaking of that you tested, sir, that evidence is still in existence?
As far as I know, it is, yes.
And are you aware, sir, that the evidence has been in the possession of the defense on more than one occasion?
Yes, I am.
And could they have conducted the test they proposed to you to conduct in terms of quantifying the amount of blood in any given sample?
Objection.
Sustain.
Could a scientist with the capabilities that you're aware of in Dr. Reeder's lab conduct the tests outlined to you by counsel for the quantification of blood in any given sample?
Objection.
Yes.
Now, if what you want to know is whether or not any EDTA that may be detected in a stain comes from preserved tube, a preservative EDTA tube, or comes from natural blood that has low levels of EDTA, would it be important to quantify with precision the amount of EDTA that you would find?
Not in this particular case. The studies that I did and the studies that were done at Quantico demonstrated very easily that you could determine between preserved blood and non-preserved blood. We're talking a factor of 100 to 1,000 times as much EDTA in preserved blood. And as I mentioned, we don't even know what the amount of EDTA is in human blood. And as I mentioned also, we don't even know whether, in fact, EDTA was found in these particular samples. The only thing I know for sure is EDTA was present in the control blood samples that I made from the K67 and K68 blood samples.
Now, you were asked if you had determined whether or not the red top tube has some EDTA in it, just by the virtue of the way it's manufactured. Do you recall that question?
Yes, I do.
Would you be capable of testing the tube to determine that?
Yes, I would.
Would Dr. Reeders be capable of testing the tube to determine that?
Yes, he would.
With respect to your question about destroying data, the digital data, first of all, what is counsel referring to with respect to the digital data?
Well, in the mass spectrometer, it's a very complex instrument, and you're acquiring a lot of data. For all the points that you want, you're acquiring a lot of data that is really not relevant, and it takes up a lot of computer space. What you're doing is waiting for the peak to come out, but you're acquiring the data the whole time. So each time you perform a scan on the instrument, you're saving that data. Each 1.5 seconds, I'm storing a lot of data on the computer. I'm recording all the masses that I'm looking for and putting it on the computer. So then I can retrieve after the run is over and look to determine whether something is present or not, and then I will print out that data that is relevant to the case.
And when you print out the data that's relevant to the case, are you referring to the graphs that have been, some of which have been shown?
Yes.
What does the digital data do in terms of helping you to interpret that graph?
Well, the digital data allows me to select the appropriate scan or mass spectrum to print out. The printout is what I interpret, which comes from the digital data. But I make my interpretation based on the chart that is printed out.
Now, if what someone wants is the digital data that backs up the graphs that you have generated, could you go back and test the evidence again and preserve that digital data?
Yes, you could.
Has anyone asked you to do that?
No, they have not.
When Mr. Blazer visited you in Washington, D.C., did he ask you to do that?
No, he did not.
And the graphs that you've presented here in court, are those an accurate depiction of the results of the testing that you performed?
Yes, they are.
So the digital data simply tells you where to print out a graph?
Well, it has all the data that's been stored, only some of that is relevant. I will go through, take out the relevant data, print it out, and put that with the case.
And so but that's the relevant data being the graphs that we've seen here in court?
That's correct.
All right, you're aware of Dr. Reeder's capability, sir. Could he test the blood of Nicole Brown Simpson that is currently in evidence for EDTA?
I believe that he could.
To your knowledge, has he done so?
To my knowledge, he has not.
In fact, as far as you know, and as far as you are aware, sir, Dr. Reeders has done nothing more than take your test results and give his own interpretation to them. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding.
And he has performed no independent tests on any of the evidence in this case?
That's my understanding.
Sir, you were asked whether or not you had taken bloodstains recovered from metal and aged them for 3 weeks to determine whether or not you could still detect EDTA in them. Do you recall that question?
Yes, I do.
If the hypothesis given to you is that there is an allegation that evidence has been planted at or near the time of collection and not aged for 3 weeks, would it have any relevance to age that blood stain for 3 weeks before testing it for EDTA?
No, I mean, if you're going to try to duplicate exactly what happened, you would want to do it the same time period. As I mentioned earlier, I don't believe that either of those would be necessary in the case of EDTA. It is such a stable chemical.
And could you explain what you mean by that?
Well, EDTA is used as a preservative. It's used because it is a very stable chemical, and it also helps to stabilize other chemicals. Its melting point, or it decomposes at about 300 degrees centigrade. That's a very hot temperature. I've seen no studies at all that EDTA will break down when it's in the dry form. And based on the studies that I've done on the blood, I can very easily identify EDTA in preserved blood that is several years old.
And how were you able to prove that, sir?
Well, I took the blood stains that we had in the laboratory that were on swatches since 1993, and I analyzed those, and I got similar results as I get from preserved blood that's preserved today, or weeks ago.
You were talking about a validation study, sir. First of all, let me ask you this. The procedures and methods that you employed to determine whether or not you could detect and then identify EDTA in any of the samples in this case, was that any new method that you've never used before?
No, I'm basically using the mass spectrometer, which I've used in the laboratory since 1975. That's my opinion is based on the mass spectrum of the chemicals.
In the course of your work for the FBI, sir, over the past 20 years, how common is it for you to be asked to look for a certain chemical in either blood or urine?
It's very common.
And so you're being requested to ask to look for EDTA in this case. Was that an unusual request in terms of being asked to look for a chemical in either blood or urine?
No, I mean, we're a chemistry toxicology unit, and we're routinely asked to identify not only a known chemical, but unknown chemicals. A lot of times we receive evidence that people don't know what the chemical is, and they want us to tell them what the chemical, drug, or poison is.
So in a case like that, where you're submitted a sample and they just say, tell us what's in it, is that in order of magnitude harder or more difficult or easier than being told, look for this particular compound?
It can be all of the above. In a drug case, if you're giving a white powder, a lot of times you will test to see if it's cocaine or heroin. A lot of times it may not be. In cases we've had in the past where people have sold something purported to be cocaine, it may end up being boric acid, which is a poison. Cocaine is sometimes cut with boric acid. So a lot of times we may be looking for one thing and it may be another. You
Remember?
really don't know what you're dealing with a lot.
Yo, remember in Up in Smoke, Cheech and Chong, Up in Smoke, when they spilled the Ajax and the girl came in with a straw? Oof.
A lot of times. But we do have the capability in the laboratory to not only identify a chemical that we suspect, but unknown chemicals.
So have you been asked in the past to identify a chemical for the first time?
Yes, on many occasions.
That's a routine thing?
What the heck,
Pretty
Richard?
much in our unit of
I've been trying to get you to speak for a year now. And now you speak to Amy? Amy, you're a witch. I don't know how you did that, Amy.
the laboratory, the chemistry toxicology, it's fairly routine to identify something that either somebody else can't identify, doesn't have the capability to identify, or has never seen before.
In the course of your work for the FBI, sir, as unit chief, do you ever teach mass spectrophotometry?
Yes, I do. We have a facility down at Quantico, Virginia, and I've been teaching at Quantico probably since about 1980, different courses in mass spectrometry, primarily relating to some of the fields that we do in the unit, arson analysis, toxicology, general chemistry, chromatography classes, explosive classes, a variety of classes in which mass spectrometry is used. And we actually had a course several years ago for the first time where we invited people to do mass spectrometry, and we had a one-week course just on mass spectrometry.
And who was it that you were teaching in that class?
Generally, peers, people from other laboratories that are doing forensic chemistry and toxicology.
Would that mean private labs, such as those run by Dr. Reeder?
Generally, for our classes, they're generally government labs. However, we do have symposiums. We're having one coming up in arson, and we're going to invite people from not only the government, but from private laboratories.
And in that regard, sir, you indicated that you're a member of currently only one of the forensic organizations noted by counsel. I can't remember which one right now.
It was the Mid-Atlantic Association of Forensic Scientists.
Thank you. Now, in those organizations, sir, do people get together and exchange ideas, the new trends that are happening in toxicology?
Yes, they do.
In the course of your job, sir, do you interact daily with people from around the country and, in fact, around the world concerning the latest trends in toxicology?
In both chemistry and toxicology, yes, I do.
Is it unusual for a local agency such as Los Angeles to request the assistance of the FBI, the toxicology unit, to assist in performing tests as you did in this case?
No, it is not.
Is it a fairly routine thing for you to be requested by local agencies to perform testing in some regard?
Yes, it is.
Now, you indicated that you testified for the defense on one occasion?
Yes, I did.
What was that? What was that experience?
It was a murder case in where two police officers were being accused of murder. One of the people they were arresting was killed or died.
And what did you have to do in that case?
It was something that I do, I shouldn't say fairly routinely, but something else I'm involved in is drug testing in hair. And in that particular case, I had done some drug testing in the victim's hair.
Sir, does it matter to you which side calls you in terms of whether or not you tell the truth?
No, not at all.
Your tests are your tests, your results are your results?
That's correct.
Regarding the validation study, sir, you indicate that the Quantico's result was that your method of extraction of EDTA recovered 93%.
On average, recovered 93%, yes.
Now, do you use the same method of extraction for the evidence stains as you do for the reference sample?
Yes.
So, for example, if you are extracting EDTA from a cloth swatch that has blood from the reference tube of Ms. Brown, and you are extracting EDTA from a cloth swatch that has the blood from the rear gate, are you using the same method?
Yes, I am.
So whatever amount of EDTA you're leaving behind in the reference stain, you're leaving behind in the evidence stain. Is that a fair statement?
I mean, it's a fair statement.
Almost.
I mean, it wouldn't be
Close.
exactly 100%. You wouldn't get 93 in this and 93, but it would be relatively the same amount that you would expect to extract, yes.
And what impact, if any, would there be on the ultimate result in terms of the relative degrees or relative amounts of EDTA? Would there be on any discrepancy in the amount of EDTA extracted from the evidence stain versus the reference sample?
In my opinion, it would have no effect whatsoever. We're dealing with chemicals that are placed in blood at 2,000 parts per million. That is a very, very, very large quantity of any substance in the blood. It's very easy to distinguish 2,000 parts per million from what could possibly be 1 part per million. And as you notice, I said possibly. I'm not even convinced that what was found in my blood and in the sock and in the gate was EDTA. I was not able to prove that. If it is, it's still in the parts per million at the most. And distinguish between parts per million, 1 or 2 parts per million, and 2,000 parts per million in chemistry with analytical instruments is very easy to do.
So, sir, then are you saying that the dramatic difference in the results more than compensates for any small degree of variation?
That is correct.
Now, you indicated earlier that you were not trying to quantitate. In other words, you weren't trying to tell us, well, I have precisely these many parts per million of EDTA in the evidence stains and these many parts per million in the reference stains. You recall testifying to that?
That's correct. My whole reason for doing this was to differentiate preserved blood from non-preserved blood.
And for that purpose, sir, is it necessary to quantify with the precision that you were being asked about before, that is to perform tests specifically for quantification?
No, it is not.
Why not?
Because the instrument was mentioned earlier, had a fourfold difference in the 50 parts per billion standard. Between 1 part per million and 1,000 parts per million, we have a 1,000-fold difference. So these are very, very, very different numbers. It's very easy to differentiate between what possibly could be 1 or 2 parts per million from what is between 1,000 and 2,000 parts per million.
And so it becomes very obvious without the need for precise quantification.
That's correct.
Let me show you some charts. I'd rather do it. I was going to question you more about that, but I think that maybe we can show it
Okay.
better than tell it. Now, you indicated to us, I think, earlier that you began testing on February 8th.
February 8th was the day that I had someone prepare 2 samples in the laboratory. one with EDTA and one without, from 2 test tubes of blood that we had in the laboratory from the same person. Those were prepared. I analyzed them with the procedure developed by myself and at Quantico, and analyzed for the presence of EDTA. And I was very easily able to determine which of the stains came from preserved blood.
Done.
And how was that?
That was done with the
Done.
first experiment I ran, which is negative ion
Woo.
mass spectrometry.
Oh,
and I
my
got
mic is on
a
again.
fairly substantial signal for the one
Sorry.
with the EDTA.
I'm done. I
and
can
got no
focus now.
signal
I
for the
needed a
sample
short to go
that
with
didn't
it,
have
Josh.
EDTA.
Now, when you did that, sir, were you in possession of the evidence from this case, that is the sock and the gate stains?
No, I was not.
So how did you perform that test? On what?
It was performed on the blood that we had in the laboratory from a case in which we put onto filter paper.
And how old was that blood?
I think that blood was approximately 6 months old. It was one of the older cases we had in the unit.
And how did you retrieve an unpreserved sample? You know what I mean? You had obviously sample from a reference tube, an EDTA tube, correct?
In this particular case, in a lot of cases, they submit to the laboratory blood in both red stopper tubes and purple stopper tubes. In this particular case, they had submitted both of those samples.
So the red stopper tubes are the ones without EDTA preservative.
That's correct.
Now, you were asked a series of questions concerning that, about whether blood in a test tube that has coagulated to some degree, because it's not in preservative, the red cap tube, whether that would affect the finding on EDTA. And in your opinion, would the coagulation of the blood affect any EDTA readings you may get?
Objection. No foundation. This is foundation.
Let me put it to you another way. You said that you removed your own blood and put it in a red stopper tube for testing.
Well, I didn't.
Sustained. Raise a question.
Blood was taken from you and put in a red stopper tube.
That's correct.
All right. And you tested that for EDTA.
Yes,
And you obtained the result that you did.
that's correct.
And when you first began the testing on February 8th, you said you had blood that was in the purple cap tube, that's the EDTA blood, and then you had purple in a red cap, blood in a red cap tube, which is non-EDTA preserved, correct?
Yes.
When you tested that non-EDTA preserved blood in a red stopper tube on February 8th, what result did you obtain?
No EDTA was identified in that particular sample.
And was that blood refrigerated when you got it?
Yes. Well,
It-
we refrigerated it at the laboratory, yes.
And in fact, how long had it been refrigerated for?
Approximately 6 months.
So was it somewhat coagulated when you tested it?
Yes,
And did you found no EDTA?
that's correct.
Now, I think you indicated that you then began testing on this case on February 19th.
That's correct.
And when you began that testing, sir, can you tell us how you prepared the samples for testing?
I took cuttings of the samples, very small cuttings, maybe 2 by 2 millimeters, and placed those cuttings into a tube to be extracted. And then I also took the known samples of blood and placed, with the case of the one blood, placed it on the sock in a control area, and then placed the other blood on a control swatch that I had. Took similar cuttings from those and compared my results.
Now, you indicated earlier that there were, when you cut samples from the evidence, you make sure to cut them at least as large, if not larger, than you cut from the reference samples. You recall that?
Yes, I do.
Does the court have scissors?
Of course.
Thank you. Would you please show the jury, I'm going to give you this post-it and ask you to show the jury how you cut samples for your testing.
The size or how it manipulates scissors?
The size.
These are very large scissors,
What kind of scissors did you use?
a lot smaller.
Smaller ones?
Yeah, I can do it. This is actually a little bit larger than the stain I would have taken.
For the record, the witness has placed
But I did.
that piece of paper that he cut onto this legal size paper that I have. I'm going to tape it down so that it will be in evidence. But that's a little bit larger than the sizes you cut?
Right, just a little bit larger. Your Honor.
What did this show?
Bobby, you don't test EDTA. It tests you.
It will, but you'll need a size reference. Pencil. Pencil.
Do you have an actual hawk? Oh my gosh. Do you actually have a
This
hawk?
is just a
Is that
relative
real?
so, yeah.
That's so cool.
Looks really big now. All right, so the jury can see, actually, it's just a little larger. It looks like it extends just a little bit past the tip of the pen.
Well, it fits well within the lines of the paper.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have better measurement. All right, you said
I'm
it's
on
larger
break,
than you
Bobby.
cut.
Yes.
Now, when you indicated that you cut a larger piece of the evidence sample, or as large, but no smaller than the reference sample, what does that accomplish?
Well, that was to ensure that I got at least as much blood from the question samples as I did from the control.
And why is that important?
Well, it turns out that it really isn't that important because there is a dramatic difference between the blood with and without EDTA, but I just wanted to make sure that I had at least as much or more of the question sample.
And was that an effort to compensate for the issue raised earlier that if you have more sample, you'll have more EDTA?
That's correct.
Was that really of concern to you in this case?
Not really, because it's a dramatic difference between blood preserved with and without EDTA.
So any small variance would be easily compensated for by the cutting method you used
Yes,
and because of the dramatic differences.
that's correct.
I'm going to show you a graph. First of all, on the 19th, you indicated, I think, on direct examination that you conducted the negative ion mode.
That's correct.
Now, why was it that you used the negative ion mode?
Well, I selected the negative ion mode because it's a very, very selective technique. Most chemicals will give a positive ion mass spectrum, but most will not give a negative ion mass spectrum. So I selected the negative ion because it's a lot more selective of a technique.
When you mean it's a lot more selective, sir, can you describe it? Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, probably one out of every 100 chemicals that I run will work much better on the negative ion than the positive ion. So its selectivity is 99 times greater than that of positive ion in that particular example. Most chemicals that I analyze will not give a negative ion response.
So that already discriminates to a large degree by weeding out those chemicals that will not react to the negative ion.
Exactly, that was my sole purpose.
And you already knew that EDTA would react with the negative ion?
Yes, I did.
And in this graph that we have here, I guess I've been asking to mark it as people's 543? 542. Thank you. All right, showing you, sir, People's 542 that's now up on the Elmo. On the far left of this graph, we have K67 and K68. What are those?
Those were the blood stains that I prepared from the known blood samples, one on the sock and the other on a piece of cotton or gauze.
I'm sorry?
They were the known samples that I prepared from the K67 and K68 blood samples.
And K67 and K68 refer to which parties?
Those were from Nicole and O.J. Simpson.
Now, what do those results indicate to you in terms of the parts per million shown?
Well, that's ion count there. It doesn't show anything about parts per million, but
Okay, ion count. And-
it clearly shows there's an abundance of ions for EDTA in both the K67 and K68 samples.
Now, to the right of that, we have Q206 and Q204. What are those?
Those were the samples that I had cut from the sock and the swatch from the gate post. And I treated those the same way I did the K67 and K68. And I analyzed them in a similar fashion and did not record any ions for EDTA.
And the one next to the very far right that says 100 ppm?
That is a standard I ran of 100 parts per million of EDTA, just to ensure that the instrument was working properly.
Okay, what do you mean when you say a standard?
That's a known EDTA sample that I took, put in solution at 100 parts per million.
And when you run something, a known quantity, on the mass spec, what does it help you to determine?
Well, it shows you that the instrument is working properly. That's the main reason that I used it here, just to show that the instrument was working properly.
Did it also indicate to you that you could detect an amount of 100 parts per million, at least?
Yes.
Now, based on the testing you performed on the 19th, what was your conclusion with respect to the question that you were asked as to whether or not any of the evidence in this case, the blood on the gate and the sock, could have come from a preserved blood test tube containing ETTA?
There was a dramatic difference between the ion count which I received on K67 and K68 and did not receive any ion count for the 204 and the 206. It's my opinion that the blood stains on Q20406 and Q206 did not come from preserved blood, EDTA preserved blood, which is represented by K67 and K68.
And based then on the testing that you performed on February 19th, you had the answer, is that correct?
That is correct.
But you didn't stop testing,
No, I did not.
even though you had the answer.
That's correct.
You were shown the letter by counsel from Mr. Harmon in which he requested that you perform the testing.
That's correct.
In that letter, he pointed out to you the language which stated that you were being asked bringing it up again on the Elmo. You were being asked to refute the possibility that the stain on the sock could have come from Nicole's reference sample. And the same thing with respect to the gate. Sir, did you take that to mean that we were demanding a particular result from you?
No, I did not.
Would it have mattered if you thought we had been?
No, it would not have.
You were going to perform the test you would perform in any event
That's correct.
and report the result that you got?
That's correct.
Did you take that to mean anything more than the prosecution's confidence that such items were not planted?
No, I did not.
And so when you went to conduct your test, did you go into it with any bias as to what you would or would not find?
No, I did not.
And did you have any allegiance either way towards what you would or would not find?
No, I did not.
Had you detected evidence that indicated to you that the blood on the rear gate and on the sock did indeed come from a preserved EDTA test tube, would you have reported those results?
Yes, I would have.
And would you have come in to testify to them?
Yes, I would have.
And is that what you found?
That is not what I found.
All right, register your reflect, counsel, that you're referring to page 2 of Defense Exhibit 1263.
Thank you. So after you completed your testing on the 19th and concluded that the blood was not from an EDTA preserved tube, you went on to do further testing.
That's correct.
And why was that?
Well, there had been a lot of talk about EDTA being a preservative and being in fabrics and being everywhere else, so I wanted to be thorough and just to see if I could detect any traces of EDTA whatsoever in blood stains.
And given what you've been telling us about the EDTA that's in soap and in detergent and in our food, did you have any opinion as to whether or not you thought trace amounts would be found in normal unpreserved blood?
Well, I mean, it's only logical to assume that if a person is eating EDTA, that some of it will be in their blood. The question is how much, and that's what I don't think anyone really knows today.
And with respect to the article referred to by Dr. Readers and by counsel today, the one from 1954, to your knowledge, that's the only one that does anything in the way of measuring EDTA in the body of a person, correct?
That particular case was a carbon-14 study, and they were able to inject EDTA, and they detected up to 30 parts per million in the blood.
And why did you find that article not to be helpful in terms of detecting what a normal level would be in someone's blood?
Because when they did the ingestion study, they only gave the subjects 1.5 milligrams, which is a lot lower than would be suspected or be consumed in the average diet.
I think you indicated on a direct examination that people would expect to eat roughly 50 to 100 milligrams a day of food containing EDTA, or EDTA in food.
That was in one of the reference articles that I provided, yes.
And this particular article from 1954, the study had the subjects eating only 1.5 milligrams orally.
That's correct.
And in that case, sir, you would expect to find much less in the blood than if they were eating or ingesting orally the amount that the studies have determined we actually do ingest, which is 50 to 100 milligrams. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes, it would.
Was there any other problem with that article and its applicability to the experiments done in this case?
Only that it did have some conflicting information about the absorption of EDTA.
With respect to the absorption of EDTA, are there different types of salts used in different EDTA forms?
The FDA has authorized the use of 3 different forms of EDTA to be put into food. This particular study only addressed one of those forms of EDTA.
Now, what's the significance of that?
Well, I don't know, to be perfectly honest with you, but unless you test it, you don't know. I mean, in the body, they could all be converted to the same thing in the stomach. I don't know for sure how the absorption would change, but until the study is done, you just don't know.
And for that reason, in your opinion, sir, as an expert, would it be appropriate to rely on that article to base any calculations on the
Josh.
amount of EDTA you would expect to...
Josh, Do you really have a hook? Do you have a hook? I need to know.
Find in an average person on any particular day.
I would not use that study to try to determine that.
Nevertheless, based on the studies that have been done indicating we all eat 50 to 100 milligrams of EDTA a day, did you form the opinion that some trace amount of EDTA might be in everyone's blood on any given day?
In my opinion, there would be EDTA in everyone's blood.
Now, when I say trace amount, sir, if the substance detected on the rear gate and the sock is EDTA, which I understand you have not concluded, but if that is the case, would you quantify those as trace amounts,
They would be in the parts per million.
which qualifies for trace amount categorization?
Well, it depends on your definition, but a part per million to most people would be a trace.
And would that amount be consistent with what might be a normal level in someone?
Well, I don't think anybody knows, to be perfectly honest with you. It could be, but I don't have any factual information to say that it is or isn't. Only that in my blood, I saw the same indications. But you got to remember, I don't know that that is EDTA. I've not proved that.
In that regard, sir, did you find in looking at the results of your testing on the sock, the gate, and yourself, did you find certain consistencies in the readings and what the graphs demonstrated to you?
Yes, I did.
And what were those?
As the one graph demonstrated, or some of them did, in my blood, the gate, and the sock, there's low levels of an ion that I look for with EDTA, very low levels compared to the EDTA preserved blood. I don't have the explanation as to what they're from. I believe they could be from other chemicals, it could be EDTA, or it could be some artifact in the instrument due to some type of matrix effect with the blood.
And in that regard, the fact that it could be another compound, sir, in your opinion, in order to rule out any other compound as being the substance detected on the rear gate and the sock, would it be appropriate, in your opinion, to look at the Merck index for parent ions of a 292 weight?
Well, what I would not do with the Merck index is just look at compounds with a molecular weight of 292. In my experiment that I conducted, I did daughters of 293. So people may assume that what I'm looking for is all compounds with a molecular weight of 292, but that's not the case.
No, I forgot to ask, what is the Merck index, sir?
The Merck index is a reference book of about 10,000 common chemicals that are used.
And does that index indicate for each of the compounds that it lists what the ions and what the ion count should be?
Well, no, it doesn't. What it does list, though, is the molecular weight of the compound. So it's a way that you can determine how many compounds are of a various molecular weight.
And is it referenced only by the parent ion?
Well, there's a lot of different references in the book. You can look up by molecular formula. Some of them you can look up by molecular weight. If you have a computer program, you can do a lot of searches.
Now, you indicated on direct examination that at some point this morning you received additional compounds of a similar molecular weight to the substances you found in the evidence on the rear gate and the sock.
Well, in the Merck index, I believe, molecular weight 292 and 293, there were probably approximately about 50 compounds that would give those molecular weights. But what you have to consider is there's probably multi-thousand compounds that have a higher molecular weight that you would also have to consider is giving the same results. Now, a compound with a lower molecular weight, unless something adds to it, you can pretty much eliminate. But just looking at the Merck index and looking at compounds at molecular weight 292 or 293, you can't eliminate all the compounds in the book with higher molecular weights that could give a similar response.
Well, how is that? If it has a higher molecular weight, how is it going to give a similar response to a 292 or 293?
Well, with the mass spectrometer, I'm only allowing that one mass to go through. Now, there's nothing to preclude a compound of a larger mass breaking down to 293 and then breaking down to the 162 or the 160 ion. That's very possible. And that's why I make sure that I do a full daughter spectrum before I ever identify a chemical in mass spectrometry.
When you say a full daughter spectrum, what do you mean by that?
Well, with EDTA, when you take the molecular weight or the molecular ion and you bombard it in the second quadrupole, it will fragment to ions. We talked earlier about some of those ions, or Dr. Reeders did yesterday, the 160 ion. Well, you also have a 132 ion, and some of the molecular ion passes through the quadrupole to 293 in this case, the quasi-molecular ion. And you not only want those three ions, but you want them in a certain ratio. In this particular case, the 160 is what's called the base peak. That's the largest ion. and then the 293 would be the second largest, and the 132. So we not only want all those ions before we identify, we want them in a particular ratio.
Now, scientifically speaking, sir, is it very important to insist that the whole spectrum be shown and in the appropriate ratio before you're willing to identify a particular compound in a court of law or anywhere?
In the chemistry unit, we pretty much require that if we're dealing with mass spectrometry alone. Now, there are other ways to identify chemicals, but if we're doing mass spectrometry, we want a full daughter spectrum. Unfortunately, mistakes have been made in other laboratories where they do single ion monitoring or look for just certain ions. It's a very dangerous practice.
And when you say a very dangerous practice, by that, sir, do you mean that you may identify a compound, for example, in this case, as EDTA, when it really isn't?
That's correct.
And in order to guard against that kind of error, is it important then to make sure that the full daughter spectrum is shown?
In my opinion, that is correct, yes.
Was the full daughter spectrum shown in the evidence of the rear gate, the sock, or your blood?
No, it was not.
Conversely, sir, was the full daughter spectrum shown in the reference samples from the defendant and Nicole Brown?
Yes, it was.
And for that reason, sir, in your opinion, is it scientifically correct or appropriate to identify the substance in the rear gate and the sock as EDTA in the absence of the full daughter spectrum?
In this particular case, it is not appropriate to identify EDTA based on the data that I have provided for the sock and the gate.
Now, having obtained the negative result for the sock and the gate on February 19th, you said you went on to conduct further testing on February 21st.
The 21st was pretty much to determine the minimum amount of stain I would have to use in order to detect EDTA.
And when you say that, tell us what you mean.
Well, what I did was I cut out some I put 5 microliters of blood onto a filter paper, and I divided that up so I took, which would be equivalent to 0.75 microliters of blood, 1.25 microliters of blood, and 2.5 microliters of blood. Then I extracted those samples, and I was able to detect the EDTA in all 3 samples. And in the one sample that was the smallest, I got the smallest ion count. The one in the middle, I got the middle ion count. And the largest sample that I cut, I got the largest ion count. And from that, I was able to determine that the minimum detectable amount of blood will be approximately half a microliter of blood.
Half a microliter?
Yes.
How big a stain is that?
Well, it's probably a little bit larger than the tip of a pencil.
Want to break now?
Yes, let's take a brief recess. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a mid-afternoon break at this time. Please remember
I
all
just
my
finished my
admonitions to you,
break. I'm
and we'll
done with my
reconvene in
break.
about 10 or 15 minutes. All right?
We're in the middle of this now, Judge.
Agent Marks, would you resume the witness stand, please?
Do it, Josh.
All right, you got enough water
My
there?
kids love it when I do it.
Good afternoon. All right, sir, now you indicated that you did not identify the substance found on the rear gate and on the sock or in your blood as EDTA because it did not present the full daughter spectrum for EDTA, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you have met with Mr. Blazier in Washington, D.C., correct?
Yes, I have.
And you have spoken to him on the phone.
Yes, I have.
You have been accessible to him, correct?
Yes, I have.
And did you explain to him why you did not identify the substance on the rear gate and on the sock as EDTA?
I believe that I did, yes.
Because of the absence of the full daughter spectrum?
That's correct.
Did you refuse to answer any questions that he posed to you concerning this case?
No, I did not.
Did he make any request of you that you conduct any of the experiments he outlined here in court today when you spoke to him on previous occasions?
No, I don't believe he did, no.
Did
Look
he ask
up,
you at that time, when he spoke to you on, previously in Washington or on the telephone,
What's
whether
the
or
name
not
of that
you were
game?
aware of any
Oh my
validation
gosh.
studies conducted by Quantico?
I'm sure we
Fortnite
talked about
dance.
Quantico, but I don't remember the
Look up
specific
Fortnite
details.
dance, or look up
And
the floss
the information
dance,
that
and
was
you'll see.
generated by Quantico concerning the 93% average EDTA extraction. That study, did it indicate that when your extraction method would, on the average, remove 93% of the EDTA from any stain?
I believe in looking it over this afternoon, it said very little EDTA remained in the second extract. It did not give a percent in the information that he received.
When it said that very little EDTA remained in the second extract, does that mean that in order to determine if your extraction methods were appropriate and efficient, that they extracted the EDTA using the method you used and then attempted to go back and extract it again?
That's correct.
And is that an appropriate method to use to determine if an extraction method is efficient?
That is one way, yes. Another way would be just to quantitate absolutely how much you remove, knowing how much you placed on the sample.
And by conducting the study that they did, was it essentially found that the extraction method you used was appropriate?
I think that it was, yes.
All right, now you indicated that you continued testing on February 22nd, even though you had determined there was no EDTA from a preserved test tube, and you went into another mode to do that testing?
Yes, I conducted the positive ion mode looking for the 160 daughter from the 293 quasi-molecular ion or the M+1 parent ion.
Now, was there something different about the method of testing that you used on the 22nd from the method you had used on the 19th?
It was the same method of extraction. The instrumentation parameters varied.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, with the instrument, you can look at the positive ions or the negative ions that are produced in the ionization. And the first day when I set up the experiment, I was looking for the negative ion that EDTA formed with the iron complex. On the second day, or on the 22nd, I was looking for a protonated EDTA.
And why did you do that? What would that give you more than you already got from your previous testing?
Well, I determined that it was a little bit more sensitive, so I would be able to detect lower amounts of EDTA that may be present naturally in human blood.
Now, when you talk about doing these tests, sir, you indicated that you tested your own blood. You recall that?
Yes.
Did anyone ask you to do that?
Not that I remember, no.
It was just your idea.
Yes, that's correct.
Nevertheless, did you generate graphs showing the results of the testing on your own blood?
Yes, I did.
And did you generate graphs showing your blood tested with EDTA and without?
Yes.
Now, when I say with and without, I'm talking about adding EDTA preservative to it.
Yes.
And those graphs were turned over to the defense?
Those were turned over when we met, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago now.
All right, back to the testing on February 22nd. Your Honor, I have here a series of 4 charts that I'd like to be marked people's necks in order A, B, C, and D.
543,
Thank you.
People's 543, A through C.
All right, sir, I'm going to show you, first of all, on the Elmo People's 543A.
Are these the graphs on March's blood?
No, Your Honor, these are going to be on the sock.
All right.
First of all, 543A. This is on Q206. Is that the sock, sir?
That's correct.
All right, could you please interpret for us what we see in the sample of Q206?
The bottom chart is the total ion chromatogram.
I'm sorry?
The bottom chart, it would be what's called the total ion chromatogram, or all the ions that we're looked for. The top chart is the 160 ion, which is a daughter ion of EDTA. It has the M/Z 160, which indicates mass to charge 160.
Now, this is the evidence from the sock itself, correct?
That's correct.
Did you attempt then to determine whether or not you could get the full daughter spectrum, that is, the 132 as well, on the evidence of the sock?
Yes, I did.
And showing you 543B, does this graph depict your attempt to see whether or not you could detect the full daughter spectrum in the evidence of the blood from the sock?
Yes, it does.
Now, you recall, you were present in court when Dr. Reeders testified,
Yes, I was.
and you heard his testimony concerning this graph that's now before the jury.
That's correct.
Do you agree with the opinion that he gave on this graph?
No, I do not.
Please explain why.
This particular graph depicts a lot of noise, is all it depicts. As I mentioned before with the electrospray, everyone is running a 50-yard dash. Everyone is coming to the finish line about the same time. There are many, many, many chemicals in blood that are going to come across the finish line at the same retention time as EDTA. So we're going to get a lot of noise signal at that area. The noise in this case is no larger, really, than it just doesn't increase anywhere. And where it increases maybe slightly, where Dr. Reeders was pointing out in the one area, that's only because everything was coming out of the instrument at one time, and it caused electrical noise. This is not real peaks. This is electrical noise. This is very common in mass spectrometry. It's electrical noise. It is not signal. Anytime you would identify something as signal, you would want something larger than the noise. There's nothing here that's larger than the noise. It's random noise that's very common in mass spectrometry, especially in electrospray where you're using
Rub a balloon
different,
on you.
I should say, electrical settings than you're using with conventional mass spectrometry. This is standard noise in electrospray mass spectrometry. this should never be considered signal or should never be interpreted as anything other than noise. What you would want to do, and what I did, and unfortunately I didn't print it out, but there was a mass spectrum taken of that particular peak, and it showed that it was just noise. Since there was nothing there, I didn't print it out. But for someone to try to make this into something other than noise is totally wrong.
In your opinion, then, is his, scientifically
We
speaking,
are
was it
really
scientifically and forensically inappropriate
piling through
for
it,
Dr.
though.
Readers to have interpreted this graph in the manner that he did?
In my opinion, it was, yes.
Now, you point out the
There are
issue with respect to
490 some
retention time,
videos.
and you recall that Dr. Readers testified
We are at
that about the same time,
371.
there was what he determined to be peaks
Oh,
of
that's good.
significance by looking at the retention time. You recall that testimony?
I recall that, yes.
Now, Dr. Readers works on the gas chromatograph mass spectrum,
Yes,
and in the gas chromatograph machine, the column in that machine is used for separation purposes, correct?
yes it is.
And in that regard, then, the time at which things come out, things pass through the column and get to the mass spec, is of significance, correct?
Yes it is.
In your machine, the LC Tandem MS with electrospray, you have indicated, I believe, an analogy that it's kind of like measuring how fast people will go in a 50-yard run.
That's correct.
They'll all run approximately at the same pace.
Well, they're going to be a lot closer than if they were running a 2-mile race.
And why is that true in your machine and not true in his?
Well, it could be true in anyone's machine. It's just the parameters that are set up with this instrument at this particular time. I'm using the mass spectrometer, the triple stage mass spectrometer for my separator, more so than I am the liquid chromatography part of it. The liquid chromatography is giving minimal separation. Everything is coming out pretty much at dead volume. That's the shortest time something can go through that column. But I can allow this to happen because I have the resolution capability of a triple stage mass spectrometer, and I can only let a particular ion go through. So I'm using that as my resolving power and not my chromatography.
Physically speaking, in your
Single.
machine,
My
sir,
next
you have
double's
a
on
column, right?
Saturday.
That's correct.
And you use a liquid to push whatever material you want to test through that column. Is that right?
That's correct.
Then it comes to a very small capillary, a very small hole. Is that right?
That's correct.
Probably smaller than I could make, right?
It's a very small hole.
And it's pushed through that capillary. When it's pushed through it, is some kind of electrical charge given to it?
It goes through an electrical voltage of about 4,000 volts.
Okay, and then is it vaporized with that electricity?
Well, it's a combination of a lot of things. They're very small droplets.
Are you
They're
talking
being,
about her hand?
Forced out of a small
Sorry,
tube.
no,
There's
never
other
mind.
gases around there, and all this helps the very small droplets to evaporate.
And when that happens, when the small droplets evaporate, they have an electrical charge given to them?
Well, the electrical charges are on the particles, and they're transferred from one to the other. But there's a lot of electrical charges that are transferred at that particular time, yes.
And the purpose of that is so that you can visualize or see what you've got.
Well, so you can create an ion. A mass spectrometer isn't any good unless you can create an ion. You either need a positive ion or a negative ion in order to separate it and identify it.
So it helps you to identify what you've got.
That's correct.
All right. And then in your machine, I think you mentioned something earlier called a quadrupole.
Well, it's a triple stage quadrupole. I have 3 quadrupoles, yes. That's something, it's a mass filter. It's used to separate out the different masses.
Okay, and the quadrupole, is it like 4 rods, kind of like, it would be like 4 pencils through which the material is passed?
Well, the ions are passed, yes.
And then you determine by changing the voltage of those poles what can pass through and what can't.
That's correct.
So you decide, okay, I'm going to let through all 293s in this case, right?
That's correct.
And so only the 293s are going to make it through.
That's correct.
Okay, then it's going to pass through another set of 4 poles.
Right.
And that second set of 4 poles, does that do anything?
Well, that's where the collision takes place. That's where you break down that ion and produce the daughter ions, the 132 and the 160 ion.
So is that like a reaction chamber?
It's a collision chamber,
Collision
yes.
And then is there a third set of 4 poles that broken down ion goes to?
That's correct.
Now this third set will let through what?
It'll let through what I select. In one case, I let just the 160 ion go through. In another case, I let from mass 130 up through 295 go through so I could get the full daughter spectrum.
So in that way, you run the material through your machine and adjust the voltage so that you can pass through and select out 293, 160, and 132.
Well, you can do it that way. What I've elected to do is allow the 293 to go through and then just look at the 160, or let the 293 go through and then look at the full daughter mass spectrum from mass 130 to 295.
Now, was that an efficient way to look for
It's where they
the
create the
132?
daughter icons.
Well, it's not the most efficient way, but it's the only way that I would look for it in order to identify EDTA. I mean, I could look for 132 by itself, but my purpose is to identify EDTA.
Do you recall counsel asking you the questions about selective response?
Selective ion monitoring, yes.
And in that procedure, you're going to focus only on the 132, correct?
That's correct.
Why was that not appropriate to do in this case?
Well, it would just be another screening test. It would not positively confirm EDTA. What I need for the confirmation is the 3 ions I mentioned in a particular ratio. And the only way I can do that is to get the full daughter. If I look for them individually, it is not proof that the other compounds or ions are not there. In other words, if I have a camera and I look for one person, another person, it doesn't prove that there aren't people between those people.
That's
so
not
I need
legal.
to look at the full spectrum to see if it's EDTA. If there's something there in the middle that doesn't belong, it's not EDTA. So I need to look at the full spectrum to determine whether or not it's EDTA.
So if you're looking only for 132s, you could be missing 160s.
You could be missing a lot of ions. There could be other ions there. There could be a 150, a 170. You don't know unless you look.
So if you look for only 132s, you could be missing other ions that would prove to you it was not EDTA.
That's correct.
All right, so for the manner in which your machine works, the separation occurs in the areas of those 4 poles, the quadrupoles.
Well, some of the separation does take place in the chromatography, but very little. Most things are coming through a dead volume. The highest selectivity is in the quadrupoles, allowing only mass 293 to go through.
Okay, so in the column in the way you use your machine, the column is not particularly used for separation purposes.
Well, it's used for separation, but it's certainly not used for identification.
It does not have the identification properties or capabilities that Dr. Reeder's machine does, correct?
It does not have the normal resolution that you would expect from chromatography.
Okay. So given what you're saying, sir, the fact that in your machine, all material is pretty much going to pass through the column at about the same time, as opposed to Dr. Reeder's machine in which things pass through the column at very different times, would it ever be appropriate to use retention time as a factor to determine whether or not you identify a compound?
Well, I mean, it could be used, but I certainly wouldn't give it much weight. I personally would not use that. I use the full daughter mass spectrum. The separation technique that I use is just simply to allow the electrospray ionization to happen, not to identify the compound. Now, certainly the compound has to come out there, but all compounds, or most compounds I would identify would come out there. So it just doesn't have what we call resolution, the ability to separate one component from the other.
Then would you say, sir, that the retention time in your machine is not a discriminating factor in terms of being able to identify one compound as opposed to another?
Yes, that's a fair statement.
And do you think that, strike that. To your knowledge, has Dr. Reeder's ever operated the electrospray?
To my knowledge, he has not. He admitted that yesterday.
And what impact, if any, would that have on the knowledge that retention time is not a discriminating factor in your machine?
Well, it could have some, but what you need to consider here is the fact that everything was coming out in about a minute. Now, under normal chromatography, like I did the one day to differentiate the blood stains, the chromatography was like 10 minutes. Generally, if you see something in chromatography that's coming out at about 1 minute, you should be able to realize that's pretty much dead volume and that everything else is going to come out there. And you wouldn't want to use that to help discriminate a compound.
What do you mean when you say dead volume?
Well, in other words, there's a certain flow through the column. If I inject something here, it physically takes a certain amount of time to come out the other end. So when I inject EDTA or anything else, it just races through the column and comes out in the minimum time that something can pass through that column. Now, retention time, generally, you want something to be absorbed somewhat onto the column, so it will take longer to pass through. It will react with the column as it goes through, so it will take a long time to come out. In this particular case, it's just passing through.
And that's the major difference between the machine he operates and the one you operate.
Well, not necessarily the machine, but
The column.
the type of chromatography that I'm doing versus what the normal chromatograph person would expect.
Now, you heard Dr. Reeders testify that he was surprised that there was only a few minutes between each scan,
Each run.
each run. Was that surprising to you, sir?
No, because that's the way I designed it.
And you run this machine almost every day?
Pretty much, unfortunately, I still try to maintain my proficiencies on the instruments in the laboratory, even though I'm in a management role. I do actively operate the instrument.
Now, given that you would not, you said signal to noise, the random peaks that you see on the chart before you on 543A, how would you characterize those?
Well, the first indication that you don't want to give much credence to this is the fact that we've got 10 to the minus fourth for noise. I mean, this is a large count. So someone that that didn't know a lot about mass spectrometry would want to know, why do you have noise that's that large? I mean, that's 1,000 ions or something. Why do you have electrical noise that's 1,000 ions? I mean, that's the first thing. If I didn't know anything about electrospray or how this was done, I'd want to know that before I made any interpretation. Generally, with most instruments, your noise level is going to be very, very small. Now, electrospray, the manufacturer suggests that you use the higher settings because they've determined that it works better that way. And this is not normal noise level that you would expect in a mass spectrometer. Plus, your noise is increased by the fact that you're doing tandem mass spectrometry. So you've got two different techniques here that require you to have this very large noise. And anytime you have noise that's 1,000 counts high, you better be very, very careful before you try to interpret and make a peak out of that noise.
Because
Because it's just noise. It's not a peak.
it's not a readable.
It's random noise. I mean, I certainly would want something at least 3 times the noise before I would even consider it to be a signal.
Okay, yeah, we talked a little bit about that. The ratio of signal to noise. Does that mean that the highest peak has to be at least 3 times higher than any of the smaller random peaks
That's
before you
correct.
call it an identification of some kind or
That's
detection?
correct. Yes.
And do you see any peak in this graph that qualifies as being 3 times noise?
No, I don't.
No peak 3 times as high as any noise or random peak.
I consider all that to be electrical noise.
All right, next in order, 543B. So then the daughter 132 is not shown on the sock, is that correct?
Not in my opinion, and in taking the full mass spectrum, it was not present.
Showing you 543B. See? Oh, that was B. See? Can you tell us what this graph shows, sir?
This is the K67 blood, which was used as a control for Q204. This is,
206?
I'm sorry, 206. This is a known blood that I took and placed on a cutting of the sock.
Now, when you say the known blood that you took, that was from an EDTA tube, correct?
Right, that was from the K67 EDTA preserved blood.
And what do you see here?
That is signal. When you have something that's, in this case, we have 10 to the 5th, 6 times 10 to the 5th, that's a large signal for representing the ion 160, which is a daughter ion of EDTA. There's a substantial amount of that particular compound coming out at that scan 39.
Now, in this graph, I don't see any of the random little jagged peaks that we did on the last one where you found that there was no full daughter spectrum.
Well, the reason you don't see the noise is because the signal is so large.
Can you explain that?
Well, if you have noise that's an inch high and your signal is 10 feet high, on a relative scale, you won't see that. So what you do is take your 10 feet and you kind of bring it down, and the 1 inch of noise disappears. That's a very, very large signal, and we're plotting it on the same scale. So the noise disappears.
The only rule
So if you
about
were
that
to-
is we never, never, never bash another channel. We only say good things. Only ever. You can talk about any channel you want. Like Pierogi? Are you about to talk about Pierogi? Because I love him. Sorry.
Generate a graph that kept the noise in it, but wanted to also depict the relative size of the peak that we see here. Would you have graph paper big enough?
Well, I mean, you can plot any of these things, and that's why I plotted on that particular graph paper the comparison of the ion counts for the blood and the question stains.
All right, so this is how a peak looks on known EDTA blood.
That's correct.
All right, and that's for the 160 daughter?
That's correct.
And going back to the evidence of the sock for the 160 daughter. Okay, now that's the evidence of the sock, correct?
That's correct. That's the blood stain on the sock.
Again, for the 160 daughter.
That's correct.
And here you see all those jagged lines and then that jagged peak.
You see the jagged lines because the signal is not that much greater than the noise.
Now I want to show you 543D. In 543D, this is again the sock with the blood you put on it from the EDTA test tube, correct?
That's correct.
So this is what they call a positive control.
That's correct.
And here you're trying to see if you can detect in the known reference blood the full daughter spectrum.
That's correct.
And did you find it?
Yes, and you can see on those traces the 132 ion, the 160, and the 293. Those are all much larger than the noise.
Who's that one girl, Ramona or something like that? I love her.
Looking at all of these
She gets
together,
them
sir.
so mad.
I'm going to try and show you, if I can, the two reference sample, that is the two known EDTA blood stains that you put on the sock that shows the parent ion and the full daughter spectrum.
Well, those are the reconstructed ions of the daughter spectrum, yes.
And on these readings, would you identify EDTA?
Yes, I would.
Now, by way of contrast, I'm going to show you 543 A and C. I'm going to show you the evidence, the blood taken from the sock itself. Okay, now this depicts your attempt to find the full daughter spectrum on the evidence of the sock.
That's correct.
And would you identify the full daughter spectrum on the sock based on what you see in these graphs?
No, I would not.
And that is because?
Because there is no signal above noise in the daughter ion spectrum.
And so would you identify the substance found in the blood on the sock as EDTA?
No, I would not.
And scientifically, sir, in your opinion, would it be appropriate to identify EDTA from the graphs and the results shown in these graphs
No,
in the
it would-
blood on the sock?
No, it would not.
And that is because?
There is no full daughter spectrum for the EDTA chemical.
All right, and you also did testing on the blood from the rear gate on February 22nd, sir?
That's correct.
And what kind of test did you perform on February 22nd on the blood taken from the rear gate?
The same as I did on the sock. I analyzed in the positive ion mode, doing both the daughter spectrum of 293, looking at the 160 ion, and the full daughter spectrum.
I have another series of 4 charts here on our people's 544A through D,
So marked.
showing you first of all people's 544A. What is that?
That's the Q204.
And that is the gate?
That's correct.
Okay, now that is the evidence, right?
Correct. That's the blood stain from the gate.
And is this an attempt for you, by you to determine whether or not you can find the daughter 160 ion?
That's correct.
Do you identify this as the daughter 160 ion being present?
That is correct, yes.
Now, how do you account for the random peaks that you see, the jagged peaks below the one larger peak?
Again, that's electrical noise.
Now, the fact that you see that electrical noise, and in addition to that one peak, what does that tell you about the strength of the signal for the 160 daughter ion?
Well, it's closer to the noise level, or it's becoming very close to the noise level in the instrument.
Does that mean it's a weaker signal?
That's correct.
I'm showing you 544B. Is this an attempt by you to see if you can find the full daughter spectrum, that is the 132 as well as the 160, in the rear gate stain?
Yes, that's correct.
And are you able to identify anything that would allow you, are you able to identify the full daughter spectrum in the rear gate blood stain?
No, I am not.
Can you explain why?
Well, there's several possibilities. One is it's not EDTA. Another would be that it's below my detectable limit.
But what do you see here in the graph?
Well, the graph is just strictly instrumental noise. There's no signal that's recognizable above the noise level.
Do you have an identification of the 132 daughter?
No.
And if there was 132 daughter below your detectable limit, could it have come from an EDTA test tube?
Yes.
And what is your detectable limit?
It's difficult to tell, but it's somewhere around 10 parts per million.
And what was the amount of EDTA you found in the blood taken from the test tubes?
Well, calculated, it should be between 1 and 2,000 parts per million.
Then based on the findings in the last 2 charts, there are A and B, 544 A and B on the rear gate stain. Is there a full daughter spectrum?
No, there is not.
would you identify the substance found in the blood on the rear gate as EDTA based on that finding?
No, I would not.
Would it be scientifically appropriate or correct, in your opinion, to do so?
No, it would not.
Showing you 544C. Tell us what that is, sir.
That's the blood stain that I prepared. Can you move it down a little bit?
Can you move it down?
The K68 blood stain that I prepared is a control for the Q204.
Okay, the K68 meaning the blood taken from the test tube containing Mr. Simpson's blood.
That's correct.
And in this case, you've applied the blood taken from his test tube, his blood, EDTA blood, onto the cotton swatch for the rear gate.
That's correct.
And this is the result you obtained.
Yes.
And based on this graph, would you say that the 160 daughter ion is present?
Yes.
And showing you 544D, did you then make an attempt to determine whether you could find the full daughter spectrum on the known stands, that is the cotton swatch on which you placed the reference blood from Mr. Simpson?
Yes, I did.
And showing you 544D, can you tell us whether or not you were able to detect the full daughter spectrum based on the results in this graph?
Yes, I was.
And can you explain to us why?
Well, it's clearly seen that the ions 132, 160, and 293 are all ions that come out at approximately 30 scans that are all above the noise level.
I'm going to show you All right, those are the results of your testing of the cotton swatch on which you put the blood from the reference tube of Mr. Simpson, correct?
That is correct.
And based on these results, would you identify the substance found in his blood as EDTA?
Yes, I would.
And in these graphs, you see the full daughter spectrum?
Those are the ions that represent the full daughter spectrum, yes.
All right, and then contrasting those results, sir, from the known, the blood that we know to have been taken from a reference tube containing EDTA. Here we have the results of the blood recovered from the rear gate, the evidence blood. Based on the results in these graphs, sir, would you identify the substance? Would you identify that a full daughter spectrum has been obtained?
A full daughter spectrum was not obtained.
Aw. You're gonna have to keep trying for daughters then. There's 4 poles in the collision chamber that helps with that. Finding those daughters. Creating those daughters. Guys, thank you so much for coming out today. Whoo, it's 10:18. I have just enough time to get ready for work. I have to be at work in 1 hour. All right. Thank you so much for coming out. This is a good one. I can't wait for tomorrow. I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks. Bye, guys.